All right, my name's Devin Waugh, the instruction librarian for NC Live, and this webinar is Accessibility in Web Design, Designing for All Using AI Tools. And our presenter today is Tesla Rush, who is the Training and Technology Specialist at Union County Library, where she leads the design of the website, which has undergone a absolutely beautiful transformation, looks fantastic. So I'm excited for Tesla to share um, her expertise in this webinar today.
All right, well, thank you. And I'm super excited to talk to everyone today about designing for all, basically, with using AIs as tools. That is my main goal here, is to kind of open up the conversation of how we can make sure we're including everyone, because the talk of being accessible in web design is huge right now. Even though we have an extension for government websites, we still need to learn and grow as it grows. And I'm just going to preface and say I started this current position right when we got our new website. So I got to experience the very fun learning all of this, and I'm excited to show it all to you guys. So I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of background about Union County Library. If you're not familiar, um, we have a population of almost 300,000. We're almost there. We're 266,672. This was as of our last state report of 2025. What's really interesting about our county, you'll see here, we have a median household income of 102,000, which if you tell anyone in any library that here, they'll be like, wow, that's a lot, because we have one side of our county that is completely rural, it is farmland, and then we have this other side of our county that is completely, city and building and growing. So when we design things for our website, we really have to take into consideration we have such a huge variety of a population that is kind of overwhelming sometimes when you think about it. We also have a little over 84,000 registered cardholders as of 2025. On average, each year we have a little over a million borrows and around 30,000 public computer usage each year. So this tells me we have a lot of active people in our community who look at our website, who use our services. So I want to make sure that our website is accessible to all of them. And if you look over here on the right-hand side, you'll see all of our locations. And if you haven't seen our website before, I just wanted to show it off a bit. I love it when Devin says it looks so beautiful because we worked so hard on it. Like, this is our main page. I will be coming back to here for some few examples later, but we have all kinds of stuff on here, and it has been each section making sure it's accessible. And sometimes that's harder than we would think it would be. A good example is this floating river of books down at the bottom. This is what we call our staff picks. This is actually embedded through our ILS. So it talks to the website. But because of that, we don't have any controls on how accessible it is. We have to go to the vendor. That's also something you have to do when making sure your website's accessible, even with just designing or formatting. Some things that you want to embed, you'll have to make sure you're talking with your vendor that they're good on their side. This one is not accessible because it does not use the tab function on the keyboard to skip to each title and description. So that is something we will have to keep working on to get it there. So that's just a little bit about Union County and our wonderful website. But I want to open up the floor to you guys, and I want to know what challenges you have faced when it comes to web design and accessibility. Everyone's challenges are different, and I would like to hear some.
So please feel free to respond to this question via the chat or unmute. Nice. Okay. So we have so far PDFs. So
Mm.
managing any sort of PDFs or documentation that might be on the library's website. Brittany sharing some of our branding colors are not accessible, and that has been a challenge for us. Barbara sharing, figuring out how to have flyers be accessible when there's so much information on them. Um, Anna asking, how do you design around tables? Um,
Ooh,
yeah,
good question. All of those are really good, especially the PDF. I will say that is not included in this presentation, but that is something I am familiar with. And there is a section that I will be go over heading, so I can cover that as well and give you guys a few tips and tricks on how you can tag your PDFs. And
awesome.
the brand colors not being accessible, that's a very difficult situation. So that is like we would have to go through our in my situation if it was something like that we'd have to go through our communications department. We have a brand manager, so that's something that they would have to figure out and decide before the next deadline, but thankfully we have that time. We have a year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to really kick off our conversation about making design accessible on web design accessible and using AI tools by talking about alt text. And I'm sure we've all heard about alt text. You've probably heard the spiel, but I feel a lot of times some of the things can get missed of what the true purpose of alt text is. I think a lot of times people can just see it as like a description of the image, but it's more so you're giving context to your image. When screen readers are using these, they are basically reading them aloud to the person who is using them. So if you are using an image and this image represents like your program or things like that, if you're using it on a flyer, you have to really look what are you using as decorative and what are you using that's giving context. And that's really when alt text takes place. If you are using something that's purely decorative, like it is not contributing anything to the actual program or it wouldn't really give context to something, then you just have to put quotation marks where it says alt text. This allows the screen reader to know that it can skip over that image. However, when I'm doing alt text and I'm entering our programs into the event calendar, I always give context to the images just because it corresponds with an event. And down at the bottom, I have an example for you guys on alt text using AI. So for majority of this presentation, I use ChatGPT because of how easy it is to use and to navigate, to upload files and to break everything down. I think ChatGPT does do a very good job of breaking things down, and I will be showing that. So if you are looking at one to help you, that is one that I have used. So for alt text and using AI, what I did is I uploaded this current image of the trophy and soccer ball that is going to be for a World Cup program for kids. And on the left hand side, where it says a trophy and soccer ball, was what was given to me for the alt text, which in general is fine. In the grand scheme of things, this is an image of a trophy and a soccer ball. That's not wrong. In the middle, we have what AI gave me. So I uploaded this picture into ChatGPT and I said, can you please give me an alt text for this image? And it gave me this whole thing, which at the end of the day, yes, all of this is correct. If you wanted to, you could copy and paste and put this into the alt text. That is true. But on the right hand side is where I kind of took what AI gave me and I condensed it down so that way it still incorporated things, but I gave a little bit more context for the image itself. Because to me, with the AI one, when it starts talking about surrounded by confetti and stars on a dark blue background, all of that is decorative. The person who's hearing the message, yeah, that's nice, but it doesn't tell them what they're hearing. So with mine, I went with a cartoon style gold trophy and soccer ball for World Cup. So I gave the style that is kind of drawn in. I included both major elements and gave indication for what it was for. Your wording won't always be that way. A lot of times, if you word things like how I did on the right, it can tell the person what it is for. Another example would be we had a program that is coming up that is about romance book taste testing. And part of the image is a stack of pastel books with different romance icons on them. And just describing it like that gives context to the screen reader and who's using it. They know that that image has romance books on it. So whatever the program is about romance books. So when you upload an image into AI, for example, I use ChatGPT. This is kind of a good example of the breakdown you're going to get. I did cut out a lot because it will give you a full report. I will be coming back to this as well. Color contrast is one of the things I probably struggle with the most. A lot of times we can look at something and we think it contrasts well, but it doesn't. And that's a lot of times I have to come and look at graphs like the one on the right-hand side. Until you see it laid out like this, I think it's really hard to see what exactly does go well together. A lot of times you would think, oh, if it's something on a on a white or gray background, is automatically going to work out well and you can read it. But I feel like this chart gives a great example of how that's not always true. And then you also need to take hue and lightness into consideration, which becomes its own thing. And that's why I like looking at the charts directly, because they have already taken that into consideration with the different hues in red, yellow, green, and all of them, and kind of laid it out. And when you're using color, it should be for intent, not just for the sake of it when creating a design, especially when it comes to web design, and because you have to think about your color contrasting. And when you start adding elements, is it necessary? Are those elements decorative? Are those elements, do they need alt text, which is great and beautiful, and you can make a wonderful website like that. But the more colorful you make it, sometimes you can make it too intense for your users. I did want to come back to this slide because this is something that I uploaded to AI. I uploaded it to ChatGPT, asking it about color contrast. Because, like I said, this is one of the things that I personally struggle with, and I am continuing to learn every day and playing around with, especially with different hues. This one, for example, to me seemed a little bit too dark, but ChatGPT said, no, it's actually pretty strong. It has strong outlines, strong thick black outlines, is good for low vision, reduced contrast sensitivity, and color blindness. So if you look over here, ChatGPT told me this is what's working well for your design. And I'm like, okay, this is perfect. This is the information that I need. But then when I come down here and it says areas that are less accessible, this is what can help you when you're struggling with color contrast like me. When I'm working on a design, if I'm not 100% sure if it is working and contrasting, I will upload it and read this areas that are less accessible. This is what you really need to pay attention to. So it pointed out the gold sparkle effects, which is around the little tree house, and the small yellow gold particles, which is true. And for anyone who may see this, it would not contrast well. It's very hard to see, especially if you're online and you're looking at this on a website, on an events page, that would be very difficult to see. But ChatGPT points out, since they are decorative, it is not considered an issue unless they are communicating meaning. And I think that's where a lot of the alt text confusion does come from. We focusing on the meaning of the image and what is giving meaning and how it is helping. And the same thing with color contrast. It all works together. So this really helped bring out to me what is working together and what isn't. And that's how you can use it as a tool. So this is something, a design that we could definitely go with. This is like, hey, would mostly pass. It even tells you down here if it would pass. Even down at the bottom, it says you could brighten the gold particles, separate foliage. It gives you hints of how to even make it more accessible. That's why I do see this as a wonderful tool for color contrast and alt text. But you do have to double check when it verifies information, especially when it says WCAG, if there's been any updates. And I will show you where you can find all that information as well, just to be on the safe side, especially if you're first learning, like what does and does not go and what does and does not consider decorative. So I mentioned hyperlinks when I was talking about color contrast. And I think this has probably been another huge struggle. You do not realize how many hyperlinks your website truly has until you have to go through each one. So on here, when I was talking about color contrast, I said links should indicate what they are for. So if someone's using a screen reader or if they have issues with seeing color differences, then if the only indication that your hyperlink is a link is that it's blue, they may never see it. And that is something I would have never have thought of, and it's something that I'm currently working on going through our website. We've already had our communications department go through our whole entire website. They spent a whole entire week on making sure everything was accessible, but things still, with links especially, they can get missed. So how do you indicate something is a link without saying, with it just being blue? Because it's kind of hard. We've gotten really used to just hyperlinking a single word or a line, and it usually gets the job done. But on this page, this is where I caught a few hyperlink errors. So this is our programs page. And on here it said to view our full list of events, visit our events page. Well, if I had issues seeing color, I might not even realize that was hyperlinked. I would think that I would now have to go to a completely different page, and then I would have to try and find that on the website. So, and then even these down here, fundraising events, if I wanted to learn more about these organizations, I might not even realize that they were hyperlinked and that I could click on them. So that is what that rule is for, which it can be tricky sometimes. It can be very tricky sometimes. So this is kind of how I fix that issue. I changed the wording on this. Instead, I said, click here for our events page for a full list of events. I know it's slightly redundant, but I wanted the person who's using it to realize they can click anywhere on here. This is where they need to click. And when they click on it, they are going to the events page. You're giving direction as to the user of where they will be going if they do select that link. The complete this form one was actually perfectly fine because it tells you is telling you complete this form right here, so you know you need to click it. The bottom sentence is the one that I actually struggled with because I had trouble trying to reword it. So what I did instead was I bolded the hyperlinks to kind of give an indication that this is important information, that this is something that needs to stand out. So that's something we're going to test. And then if that isn't going to work, I will probably just reword it in a way that indicates that each one will lead to a separate page. And when we talk about the pages, this is where some things have been kind of lost because they're like the little things that are easy to forget. And a lot of times I have to remind myself these things as well, especially when it comes to reading level. When you're putting things out there for our patrons, I think we have this idea of who our patrons are, but that isn't always the case. Communities are wide and large and changing, and to be accessible to everyone, I think is important to make sure that your website or whatever media you're putting out there is on the easier reading level, just so that way everyone has access to the information if possible. So what is recommended when it comes to being accessible in design and websites is lower secondary education level, anywhere from like upper fifth to lower eighth, those are great kind of reading levels. So if you're kind of unfamiliar where that is, time to visit your children's area and see some chapter books. But they also have some good examples out there. I think Purdue OWL, they mostly do APA and stuff, but I believe they also do some sentence structuring to kind of show you different education levels. So that would be something you can look into as well. But just to remember, no matter what you're putting out there, is you're trying to reach as many of your patrons as possible. Another thing is sans serif fonts are easier and faster to read. So the difference between sans serif and serif. So the top one in this little box, that would be serif. Serif means it has a tail. The one in the middle, that is sans serif. So that is the font that I have been using throughout my whole entire presentation in order for it to be accessible. So they're a lot easier to read because you don't have these accents. That actually does take your brain and your eyes time to process. And that's why I always tell people don't use caps text if possible. If you can't avoid it, please do, because that takes your brain a long time to read. And who knows what, even like with a screen reader, how that is even read. I'm not sure if that would be read very well. So, and then what font you choose also makes an impact on how long it will take someone's brain to be able to process it and their eyes to be able to read it. And that is why sans serif is recommended. And I just like to use the example down at the bottom, because if you really focus in on it, you'll notice your brain does take a little bit longer time at the bottom. When we're talking also about reading the page, we're also talking about font size. I know 11 to 12 seems very small, but it is what is recommended officially by the WCAG. And it from the logic is that patrons can be able to zoom in on things if needed, and that is true. And it's also the recommended size for printing out materials in design as well. I usually stick around 12 personally. I feel like 11 is pushing it just a little bit. Do not, if you can get away with it, use pictures of text, because a screen reader is going to read it as a picture. And so if you didn't get that image and alt text, it no longer has anything to kind of pick up. If possible, just use actual text instead of that way the screen readers can capture it and you don't have to worry about missing that step. And then when we talk about using proper headings in order, if you look on the right-hand side, this is actually something our communications department came up with here in Union County when helping us understand why headings are important. Now, when I talk about headings, I'm not talking about like labeling each paragraph. If you are in some type of website builder, editor tool, we use Granicus here at Union County. When you go in and you are formatting each thing, it will tell you in the text box, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Same thing for PDFs when you're editing them and making them accessible. And the same thing, you can even do the same thing for Word documents. If you ever notice at the top in the text portion and it says heading 1, those are the headings that you can follow, or you should follow, because that's how screen readers will read the information. So if you're putting your headings, if you're using different headings and formats, is really what it boils down to. It's a stylized format built within the system that tells the screen reader what order to read things in. So if you're not using your proper headings, and it will show at the top of your editor which one you're using, then the screen reader will skip around. We also talked that PDFs were brought up earlier. So when it comes to making PDFs accessible, your biggest thing is making sure the reading order is correct. And thankfully, Adobe is really amazing with being able to auto tag, and it can auto read. if you aren't using, I'm not sure what programs that may be used besides Adobe for editing PDFs for accessibility. But if you're not using that one I would definitely, Acrobat, excuse me, I would definitely recommend Adobe for editing PDFs. It will auto tag, it will automatically tell you what you're missing, and it will show it on the right hand side. And it can tell you if your alt text is missing from an image in your document, and it will let you fix it right then and there. It is probably the easiest way to make PDFs accessible. So I kind of wanted to talk about do's and don'ts for designs with AI because I want people to remember AI is a tool that we can use to make designs accessible. We don't necessarily have to rely on it completely for the design. It can be just used as any normal tool. So that's why I tell people be careful of using AI to generate images. I personally would avoid using AI generated images for design just because we're still learning how these images react in like different elements, and I'm not sure how screen readers adapt to them. So that's something that I'm still curious about. And sometimes you can build exactly what you're looking for either way. So, like on the right hand side, I did ask it to generate me. I used the AI Magic Media in Canva, and I asked it just to generate me a cartoon dinosaur in a hat. And the top was what I got, and the bottom was what I created. Now, me personally, I would stick with the bottom one just because, oh, that would be very easy to give alt text to. I don't have to worry about contrast and things like that. So that's why I tell people still evaluate your images, even if they are AI generated. Make sure it is still following every single thing that you would do for your own design that you created. Um, Another thing, never upload anything to AI that has information on it. When I say information, I mean things like names, dates, locations, things like that. But you also need to check with your organization's AI policy. Right now, I think a lot of organizations are very solidifying what people can use AI for. And Union County, we have ours in place as well. And ours is no sensitive information uploaded into AI. So please be careful. I personally, when I'm uploading anything into AI for accessibility evaluation, I don't have any words on it. I don't have any text. I usually am focusing more on how the design works as a whole for accessibility. And another tip that I have that people normally don't like when I say be vague but precise to keep unwanted information out of AI, which sounds like an oxymoron. But basically, what that means is you kind of want to get a little information, but not the whole chunk. So, if I was wanting a description for a Fancy Nancy tea party, which we have done here, I would say, how would you describe an event aimed for kids and as a tea party? I didn't include Fancy Nancy. I didn't include times, locations, just to get a general idea to get the ball rolling. But please don't put the whole thing of write me a description for a Fancy Nancy tea party, et cetera, et cetera. Because then I'm basically feeding everything into AI. And at that point, it's just going to feed my information back to me. So it's not really going to help me give me a description. So this is the fun part. This is where we get to look at some resources. So I'm actually going to be starting with Wave. If you are not familiar with this, I definitely encourage you to get to know the Wave browser extension. Um, I actually have it downloaded on my current browser. It is free. And please check your organization's policy to make sure you can download extensions before doing so. But it is super, super helpful. I'm just going to demonstrate it for you guys. So we are back on the Union County website. When you download and install the Wave browser extension, it's literally a W. If you look at the top of my screen beside the search bar, it's just a W. And so if you click on it, on the left hand side is what will pop up. And at first, it can look very overwhelming and you don't really know where to look. But I'm mostly focused on what I do know. So right here it's telling me I have 9 contrast areas and they are all highlighted with this red box thing. So if I click on one, it's going to take me to that area so I can see what's going on. What is it picking up? Now, it may pick up things that I can't contrast, like someone brought up earlier about their brand colors not being accessible. Sometimes they won't contrast and then therefore considered not accessible, especially if it's in a logo. So things like that. This one, it also pointed out a nearby image has the same alternative text, and what it's actually pulling up is these 3 programs I have listed. So, and it's also pulled up 5 possible headings and things like that. So right here is going to tell me my score. This is basically my accessibility score. Right now, I rank a 7.3 out of 10, which honestly, we try to stay at a 7 and higher. So to me, that is really good. We're trying to stay on the ball, though I don't like seeing 41 alerts. So this extension is just so helpful if you are just needing a quick glance, or let's say it's next year, we're getting closer and closer to deadline, you want to make sure you didn't miss anything, you can take this through your whole entire website to kind of guide you and see what may need to be fixed. It is one of the most helpful things I've ever used. But I do want to also go back to the WAVE website and say that you can get your accessibility impact assessment report through here. And you can also copy and paste web addresses directly into WAVE and it will evaluate for you. So if we did the library's website, it's going to say I don't have permission. So, but if you have permission to edit it, it would let me go in and do that. But I love just the browser extension alone. It's perfect for what I need, especially if I come over here to color contrast. Love it. It's just so helpful. And it's telling me I failed, and I don't like that. So these are things that I'm going to have to fix, but it's logos. So that will be fun. Let's see. Next thing I wanted to talk about was the Web AIM contrast. So it's the contrast checker. If you did not want to use AI to check your contrast, this would be great because it also tells you your contrast ratio here. And you could just type in the hex codes for your designs if you wanted to, if you already had up and running and you want to make sure your foreground and your background colors contrasted enough. So I think this one is actually very easy to use when it comes to checking your color contrast, checking your text and your objects. So this is a great evaluation tool if you did not want to use AI. Oh, and then another one for color contrast, I like VizCheck, but the also I like about it is they have different kind of checks that they can run for different eyesights to make sure. So like Tiny Eyes simulates infant vision and things like that. So that way you can see what is working and what isn't. So this one I'm still learning. It's been fun though to kind of upload images and see what it does. I would show you on this computer, but I'm borrowing this one. So it will break down originals, simulated, and things like that, and you can mess with it over here. This one, I will say, is a little bit more hands-on. If you are wanting to really dive in and play around with color and contrast, I would use this one. If you are wanting to do a basic check, stick with WebAIM and then either use that or a basic chat upload for AI. Either one of those can help you get the job done when it comes to checking color contrast, but this will definitely help when it also checking for color blindness. So it is something to consider. Next, I wanted to talk about the Website Accessibility Initiative, which we are familiar with. I feel like most of us are familiar with, but I'm not sure most people actually ever visit the website itself that breaks down the overview of everything. And I know personally that this can seem extremely overwhelming because it's a lot of words, a lot of things are hyperlinked, it's a lot of information. But something really cool that they did is they broke everything down into a guideline. This guideline has been one of the most helpful tools I can think of. I think I said that for everything, but it's been one of the most helpful tools when it comes to explanation of how to do something and why. So I just wanted to show an example on here of how it does break down things. So, images of text. I just scrolled down and picked a random topic, and it tells you um, a little bit breakdown, notes, and everything. But on the other side, it says understanding images of text and how to meet images of text. So that's in the little square, and that is beside every single thing in this guideline. And what it does is it will break down for you of what it means, what to do, and why you need to do it. And that to me kind of helps people understand the importance of this. I think sometimes that can kind of get lost in the sea of things of why we have to do certain things. And sometimes it may not be explained to us very well. So I like how this really breaks it down and how it tells me how I can fix it, and it gives me the intent of everything and it benefits, and then it gives me examples. So this guide in itself just breaks everything down. I have this bookmarked on my personal computer, and if I'm not sure of something, if I can't remember if I'm referencing something correctly, I just come here and I go to the section I need and then go from there. And this has been so helpful. I will tell you, I've also used it a lot for this presentation because there were some things I have forgotten, like text spacing, line height to at least 1.5 times the font size, spacing between paragraphs, and all of that. Not normal things we would consider unless we're just randomly designing, but this is talking about designing and making sure that your user can read it. And I think that might get lost sometimes. So I highly recommend if you are doing any kind of design, web, print, doesn't matter, to at least bookmark this because it is has every single thing you can think of that you will need to know when it comes to accessibility and design. And that is the time that I open up to questions.
Folks, feel free to put your questions in the chat. If you'd like to unmute, you're welcome to raise your hand. But thank you so much, Tesla. I really like the resources that you shared. I think they're really useful to flag for later for folks.
Thank you.
I think it's interesting what you said about kind of figuring out how AI generated content interacts with accessibility checkers. Um,
Yeah, it's something I think that is still going on, and I don't feel like it's brought up enough into question. And so I'm not sure if there's a lot of like resources on how they interact. And I think people are still trying to figure that out. It's why I
yeah.
try and avoid it, just because if I'm putting it on the website, is going to all of our patrons, and I want to make sure all of our patrons have at least the chance to access all of the information and designs because we want everyone to see the beautiful work we do. We just might have to break it down a different way.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I think the point of caution of like wanting to use them to describe events that the library
Mhm.
might be putting on or to generate kind of ideas of how to describe things. Um, yeah, just avoiding some of that identifying information, I think, is really key.
That is probably one of the biggest things. Don't upload spreadsheets. ChatGPT or any AI system, please. And one person, I think you said, brought it up later about table formatting. And that is something also we've been running into, making sure your tables have headers. That is really important. So don't have like a paragraph about say, oh, this is what we charge for this, and then have a random floating table and it says books 50 cents, but no header or indication because the screen reader is not going to know what's going on.
What do you feel like? This is a question that came in from registration, but like, what are the best sort of free AI tools that you recommend when creating websites? Would you just say kind of like a free account to an LLM like ChatGPT, or what are some tools that you find are useful?
To create a website
Or like, I think the question was more like when you're not to create a website itself, but like for web design.
for web design, I will say if you use Canva, do not rely on Canva's magic media. It's still a huge work in progress. Even when it comes to editing, it's got a lot of hiccups. I haven't personally used AI to create a design. I
Mhm.
more so use AI as an evaluation tool.
Gotcha.
I I personally like to make sure that I get to the point where I have this stuff kind of like ingrained in my brain so I don't have to get to that point. So I like to use ChatGPT as kind of like my person who double checks my work. Like, did I do this correctly? And things like that. And that's where I can find it's very helpful because it can be like, actually, you forgot about this rule. So that is where I use it when it comes to design.
Yeah, not offloading the design portion, but using it to sort of evaluate the accessibility piece later.
Exactly. That's why I tell people just be careful when you're using it to generate images. Is not guaranteed that it will be accessible, so don't assume that it is.
Mhm. That makes sense. Folks, any questions for Tesla? We have Barbara asking, how reliable is the checker in Canva for flyers?
If you're wanting your flyer to check, if you're wanting something to check that your flyer is accessible, Canva won't do that. I would use something like ChatGPT, but don't have any information on the flyer. Personally, I would take all text off, run the main design through AI, and then I would personally see if that's accessible and then go from there. Because after that, you just have to make sure your text is the right size, you're using a sans serif font, and that the font colors contrast with the background. So that way you can keep your information protected. You're still involved with the design, but you know the design's accessible.
Interesting. Yeah. We have another question from Aaliyah asking, any tips for working with music, scores, or sheet music?
Oh, no, I haven't used that yet. But I would definitely be interested as to how that would be. You know what? I got to look now that we talked about it if they actually have something in the guidelines
Oh, yeah.
about music. Let's see. They have audio description pre-recorded. So if we're talking about sheet music, then we're talking about icons. Hmm. I guess my question to that would be, is it a PDF?
Yes. Okay.
So the first thing that I would do is I would have Adobe run an accessibility checker on it because that's something personally I have not run into, but now I'm so curious as to how that would work. But
Yeah.
Adobe's automatic tagging system and checking for accessibility is so good. So it would make it accessible to where you could just upload the PDF itself into a website. So that could be a way around that. But as to extracting it from the PDF and putting it directly into something and then making it accessible, that I'm not sure. I'm wondering if that is probably somewhere in the guidelines, I'm for sure, but it's going to be something very niche. I also can reach out to my communications department. We have two people in that department. They're basically, this is all they're doing for the next few years. And she's absolutely amazing with this kind of information or finding it. So I can always reach out to her. But I also suggest reaching out to any communications department that you may have. Communications and marketing, these are the types of departments where even though that's not my department, I'm kind of adjacent. We are having to learn all of these guidelines. So use them as a resource. I use my communications and marketing department for the county as a resource daily.
Nice. Yeah. I also put a link in the chat to the question. University of Michigan has some best
Mm-hmm.
practices for making sheet music digitally accessible, but it seems like the guidance on that is obviously changing and developing. But there doesn't seem to be a ton of documentation out there. So I definitely think like, yeah,
If your
university
PDF is
websites,
accessible,
accessibility departments.
yeah. As long as your PDF is tagged accessible, then at least the screen reader can know what it is. And
Hmm.
that's your first goal. But then I'm
Yeah.
assuming you're wanting whoever is using it to also